a member of the ibuildit forum had a problem with SketchUp. He'd created a design for a cabinet that needed to fit into a particular space, and although he'd come up with a finished design, he wasn't happy with how long it had taken, and so I thought I'd run through how I would create the same design in SketchUp and see if there are any tricks that might be useful. So before I start, just pointing out that on the left hand side there I actually use the large tool set, which gives access to lots of buttons. I also use keyboard shortcuts, but I've tried to avoid those in this video so that you can see exactly which options I'm selecting. So the space for the cabinet is 2 feet wide, 19 inches deep and 31 inches high. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a wire frame for that space, and that then allows me to draw everything within that space to exact dimensions. So I start off drawing the base, click in the dimensions box in the bottom right hand corner and type in the actual dimensions that I require. So that's 19,24, so that means 19 inches deep and 24 inches wide. So if I just zoom out and reposition the screen, and I'll add some dimensions to that box so you can see exactly how large it is. So there you can see 24 inches wide and 19 inches deep. So the next thing I need to do is to extend that rectangle upwards to create a 3D space, and for that I use the push-pull tool and just start pulling it in the upwards direction. I'm not going to try and judge it exactly. After it's starting moving in the right direction, I'll go down to the box in the right hand corner and type in the actual distance I want it to move, so in this case 31 inches. So now we have a box that represents the space to be filled by the piece, and what I'm going to do is create it as a component. To create a component, you triple click on the thing you've just drawn, and then use either the G, or on the edit menu you can select a component. You'll see me doing quite a lot. Every time I draw something I create it as a component, and that allows me to move it and stretch it independent of other things. So there we can see the height is correct. However, this is a solid box, and so what I'm now going to do is just click on several times on each pane to get the surface selected, and then delete the surface. So all I'm left with is the wire frame. Okay, so now we're ready. We've got the space to be filled. Now we're ready to start making the individual panels of the build. So I'll start with the back panel. It's a rectangle. I can't tell exactly from the diagram, but I'm assuming that it's extending all the way to the base and all the way up to the top with no rebates or anything like that. So it's just a regular panel, and I'm going to pull it out so that it's 1/2 inch thick, so representing maybe 1/2 inch plywood being used. You'll see sometimes I type fractions in, sometimes I type decimals. You can put anything in that box. And again, I'm triple clicking and then going to edit and make component. Okay. The other thing I think I'll do is just colour this as I go along to represent the different panels. Okay, so that's the back panel in place. Now we'll draw one of the other panels. So we've got the side panels we could start with, or maybe the panel at the bottom. Again, it's difficult to see from the diagram, but it looks like the side panels are resting on the bottom panel, so I'm going to create the bottom panel first. So there you can see where that wireframe is extremely useful. I just have to stretch things to the corners. I don't have to worry about typing the actual measurements in, because I already know that the wireframe is the correct dimensions. Again, typed in the 1/2 inch to represent 1/2 inch plywood. Triple click G and create the component. And we'll give that some color as well. One thing to watch out for if you are using plywood in a project like this, of course 1/2 inch is never exactly 1/2 inch, and so don't cut things directly from the measurements in SketchUp if you've been using 1/2 inch. I've done that on several occasions and ended up with things too short or too long, because I've assumed that 1/2 inch is 1/2 inch. So now I'm going to draw the side, and again I'm starting from that internal corner and going all the way up to the outside of the wireframe, and again that automatically then keeps it in the right plane. Again, pull it out and type in the 1/2 to take it back to 1/2 inch wide and convert it to a component. At this stage I could just draw another rectangle on the left hand side, but I'm actually going to copy the right hand side. So to do that, I start moving it first, and then as it starts moving, just tap on the control button. Just tap and release, and as soon as you tap and release, you'll see that the original is put back in place and you're now moving a copy. Now it can be difficult to move in the right way because it'll start going off at different angles. So again, what I've done there is I've started moving in the green direction. I could see as I was moving that the arrow was green, so I knew I was moving in the green direction. And I'm also going to flip along the direction that I've moved. That's useful. We won't see it in this project, but if you're using things like dados and so on, by flipping, essentially creating a mirror image, it means that later on when you start cutting the grooves, they're cut on the inside face of both pieces. And now I'm just moving it again and snapping it to the outside corner there so that everything lines up. And we just click that zoom extents button, one of the magnifying glass buttons there, and it just zooms out to the size of the model. So what next to draw? It looks like the next thing we maybe will start drawing is some of the horizontal pieces. I'm going to colour the sides first. Okay, so we'll start with the horizontal pieces. Now I think here when I looked at the text above the image there, it was saying that there's a drawer for welding accessories, and I think the drawer is on the right hand side about halfway up, and then two more 4-inch high, or space for two more 4-inch high drawers beneath that. So from that I'm assuming that the squares in the bottom right hand side of the diagram are 4 inches high. So what I'm now doing is bringing a guide up. I use the guide tool a lot. You can see I'm making sure that I'm going up and down from the front of the cabinet, going up and down on that blue axis. I don't want it going off in different directions. I want it going straight up, and I'm now going to tell it that I want it to go up a specific amount. So get it moving in the right direction first, then go in and specify the distance. There we can see it's a 4-inch space. So if it's a 4-inch space and I started from the bottom and the plywood at the bottom is 1/2 inch thick, then I actually need that guideline to be 4.5 inches from the base. again, I'm going from the measurements in the text. I think that the actual diagram is a different scale, but we'll carry on with that. The same principle applies, of course. You could put in any dimensions here. And then what I'm going to do is just again use the measuring tool and just put a measure on there for that guide that I've just put on, just to make sure that it's the right height. So it's a 4-inch gap that I've created. Okay, so now that I've got that in place, I can draw a horizontal piece. Now here you can see the problem is I've got nothing to snap to over on the other side, and so SketchUp is trying to work out which dimension I want the rectangle to be in, and it's guessed wrong. So let's just undo that, and what I'm going to do is create another guide so that I've got something to snap to. So again, you'll see me do this a lot, creating guides before I draw something. So again, pulling the guide up in the right direction and then going to change the length to the exact dimension. Now when I use the rectangle tool and I'm going to corner, it's automatically going to create the rectangle in the right plane. And again, I'll make it 1/2 inch thick and I'll create it as a component. Okay, and give it some color. Now what you can see with this this shelf that I've created, that's not exactly what was supposed to be in the diagram. Now I could redraw it, but what I'm actually going to do is compress it across from the left so that it becomes narrower. Now to do that, I can't actually see the left-hand side of the shelf. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'll actually temporarily hide the left side of the cabinet, and to do that you can just right click and you'll get a menu that comes up that has various options, and one of them is hide. So by hiding that piece, I can now see the edge. I'll zoom in on it. I can now see the edge that I want to push. So click a few times until it's selected, until it's only the edge that's shaded, and then use that push-pull tool and push it across. Now I don't know exactly how far I need to push it across, so I'll just push it some of the way, and then I can make adjustments later. And I'll also go and unhide the side piece again. So that's on the edit menu again. It's off the screen now, but there's an option to unhide, and you can either unhide the last one that you hid, or you could just unhide anything that's been hidden. Okay, so again, looking at the diagram, I don't know exactly how wide those the shelves and the drawer are supposed to be, so I'm just going to guess and stretch them accordingly. So I can see the overall width of the cabinet is 2 feet. It looks like it's a little bit off center, so I'll guess maybe it's about 10 inches or something like that. So again, I'm creating a guide 10 inches away from the side, and I'm trying to click on that face, but I can't select the face. So I'm zooming in, and there you go, I've got the face now. Use the push-pull tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm pushing and pulling the face, but I'm going to push it until the corner snaps onto that guide that I've created. So you can see it doesn't matter where I am on that guide, the corner is going to snap to that line. And so that brings the shelf out now so that it's exactly 10 inches wide. Okay, so now I've got that shelf completed, I can make the next one. And again, I'm moving it up along the blue axis, then tapping the control button to bring up the copy command, and then I'm going to tell it that I actually want it a certain distance, 4.5 inches above. The reason it's 4.5 inches is to account for the ½ inch thickness of the shelf, so that the gap between the two is 4 inches again. So here you can see already that the model I'm building doesn't look like it's exactly the same as the picture, because I've gone by the dimensions that were in the text. Now what I'm trying to do here is create the third shelf, again using the same copy feature. And what you can see here is that as I drag it up, drag the copy up and let go, it's snapping to a line, and therefore it's in the wrong plane. So drag it up, hit copy, and because my cursor is right near to that line, it's snapping to that line. So I'm undoing that to get rid of that. Again, now moving up, and I'm moving it a long way up, and then hitting control. So now I'm nowhere near that line, it's in the right place in terms of the X and Y axis, and then I can just change the height, in this case 2.5 inches, to leave a 2-inch gap between those shelves. Now, of course, that shelf needs to be wider because it stretches all the way across the cabinet. And so here, use the push-pull tool, but because I've created these shelves as copies of each other, they all stretch together. So let's put that back. What I'm going to need to do is make one of them unique. So right click on the shelf and make unique. So now what I've got is the top shelf is different from the other two. The other two are still copies of each other, but the top shelf is different, and I can now stretch that top shelf. Again, I'm using the corner and moving it all the way across to the inside face of the edge piece. So again, I'm just snapping. So I've already said that I'm pushing and pulling the shelf itself, but I can snap to something outside of that shelf. Okay, so now we've got the horizontal pieces made. There's actually one more horizontal piece right at the top. But before I create that, I'm going to create that vertical divider. What I'm going to do for the vertical divider, again, I could try and draw it in place. I could create some guides to make sure it was being drawn in the right plane and so on. But actually it's probably easier to just copy one of the side pieces and shrink it down. So again, start moving it, press the Control key, make sure I'm moving it on the along the edge or in the right plane, and then rather than trying to work out exactly where it goes, get it close enough, and then just type in the dimension or the distance that I'm moving it. And that was wrong. You can see that I've copied it over the edge of the shelves, so 10.5 was the actual distance I needed to move. And now all I need to do is to shrink that down, but this time I'm going to remember to make it unique first, so that I don't shrink all of the side pieces as well. Select the top face because that's what's going to be pushed. And then using the push-pull tool, again getting to the corner and bringing it down to the bottom of the horizontal shelf. Again, anywhere on the bottom of that shelf will give me the right height, and I usually find that snapping to corners or intersections is the easiest. So looks like we're getting the right sort of structure here. And there's the other horizontal piece there. You can see it just below the top. Again, I don't know exactly what the dimension is there, but I'm going to create a copy of the full width shelf. So start moving it in the right direction, press the control key to get the copy, and I'll take it all the way up to the top first. That was a 19-inch move, so let's say I wanted about 2.5 inches down. I can change this to 16.5. And so now I've got a 2.5 inch gap at the top of the cabinet. Oh, maybe I wanted 3 inches. So there we go. And there's the 3-inch gap. Now this is one thing that's a little bit annoying sometimes when you're using the measurement tool. It just will not come out in the direction that I want it to come out. I wanted it to line up with the other dimensions I'd done between the shelves, and just wasn't having it, so sometimes you just have to give up. And it's only there for reference anyway. Okay, so that's the main structure of the cabinet. There's a couple of little details though. The front piece at the front, the stretcher piece, is actually supposed to be flush with the front and full width. So to accommodate that, I need to take some notches out of the side panels, and actually similar the bottom of the center divider as well. So I'm going to show how to cut those out. There are lots of different ways of cutting out a portion, but again, this way I find quite easy, and again I'm going to use guides or references to other lines to achieve it. So I've selected the front face, and I'm just going to draw a line across that face. I'm making sure that I'm going on the green axis, so it's a horizontal line. It's going all the way across from one edge to the other, and what that's done is it's divided the face into two sections. So now I can use the push-pull tool and push just one of those sections. Now, what you need to check is when you're using the push-pull tool, it's going to push and pull whatever is highlighted, and I had the wrong thing highlighted, so let's undo that. Click on the thing that I want to move, then use the push-pull tool, get it moving in the right direction, and then tell it to move only 1/2 inch. Again, I've used 0.5 there rather than 1/2, but it works the same. So now I've got that notch cut out, which is 1/2 inch thick, which is the thickness of the plywood that we're using. And you can see, because those sides were a copy of each other, whatever I did to one side has been replicated on the other side. So now I can easily draw another rectangle to represent that front piece, and again pull it out to 1/2 inch thickness. And create a component and give it some colour. Okay, so now I need to do the same thing at the bottom. Again, I don't know the exact height of that piece, so I'm going to make a guess. I don't have anything to reference the height yet, so I'm going to create a guide to give me a consistent point. So you can see if I could just draw straight across, but I don't know what height that's at. The other thing to note is that if I was to push that piece, it's going to push it over on the other side as well, and for the bottom I don't want to do that. So now what I'm going to do is actually make one of those sides unique now. So it was useful having them as copies when I was doing the top notches that had to line up, but now I'm working on the bottom that has to be different. I need them to be unique. Okay, so I've created a guide. We'll say 2 inches up, so it's about half the height of the opening on the right hand side. Select the face, draw a line across where the guide intersects, make sure I've got the bottom part of the face selected, and then push back 1/2 inch. And then I'll do the same thing for the center panel. And because that guide was drawn across the front of those panels, I can use the same guide. Okay. And while I'm here, I might as well see if I can draw the panel to go in front of that section. The difficulty you can see here is I want to get that corner, and I want to come to the inside corner. I want it to be in the same plane, and I'm having difficulty snapping to it. And you see here I've actually snapped to the wrong thing, and I can tell I've snapped to the wrong thing because it's got a strange dimension. It doesn't look right. You can also maybe see the gap on the left hand side. So undo that and try and reposition so I can get to the point where I can clearly see and get the cursor on the 2 diagonal corners. And there we go. Now that's in the right plane. You can see it's a nice even measurement there, 2 inches by 13.5. Now I can stretch that out, and one thing I'm going to stretch out, I know it's 1/2 inch, but rather than type 1/2 inch again, I can actually stretch it and then reference the front face. So it's now being pulled out so it's flush with the front face, which of course is the same 1/2 inch. And again, I'll create it as a component and color it. Okay, so that's most of the cabinet done. What we don't have yet though is a drawer. Now again, I wasn't given any dimensions of the drawer or exactly what sort of joinery might be used to construct the drawer. So I'll go through and show how to do a fairly simple drawer construction. All I'm doing here is selecting a load of those measurements that I put on and the guidelines and so on, and deleting all of those because I don't need them anymore. Now again, there are various ways to build a drawer like this. One way is that you can hide the side panel and try and draw it in place. Another technique I like to use though is essentially build the drawer outside of the opening. So I know it's got to be the same dimension as the opening. So I'm drawing a rectangle here to fill the hole. Again, I'm assuming it's made out of 1/2 inch plywood, and I'll create that as a component, and that is actually going to be the back of the drawer. So I'll now build the drawer out from the back, and then we can slide it in. Okay, so I've got the back piece, and I can just copy that to make a front piece. So start moving it, make sure I'm moving on, in this case, the red axis. Hit the control button, and now I've realized I don't know how deep this drawer has got to be because I've forgotten the dimension of the cabinet. So let's get rid of that. So I'm now just doing a measurement to see how deep, or get rid of the front piece. I'll do a measurement to see how deep the drawer space is. So it's from the front of the cabinet to the inside of the back panel. That's 18.5 inches. And I know the drawer back is going to be 1/2 inch. So again, we'll create the front by moving and hitting the control key. I forgot to hit the control key. There we go. And then I'm going to say that oh, it snapped again. You saw that snapped to the side piece, so let's move it a long way out of the way so it can't possibly snap to any other lines. Hit the control key and then go and tell it how far it actually needs to move. So 17.5 inches. And now what I'll do is draw a side piece. So again, I'm drawing from one corner to a diagonal corner. That creates the side piece in the right plane. Again, make it 1/2 inch wide, or thick, sorry. And create that as a component. Now, I don't trust my maths, so I'm going to just measure now how deep that drawer is from the back corner to the front corner. And sure enough, my math is wrong. It's an 18-inch deep drawer, and the space for the drawer is 18.5 inches. So I could redo what I've just done, or I can move it. So if I move the front piece out by 1/2 inch, then the front piece is now in the right place, and I can now use the push-pull tool to stretch that side piece. Okay, and there we go. So the drawer is now the right size. And I need to put the other side on, which of course will be a copy of the right hand side. So again, I move it, hit the control key, get it about close enough, and then just type it in to adjust. And there we go. And the other thing I'm then doing, you can't see because it's off the screen, but I've right clicked on that piece and told it to flip along the green axis. And you'll actually see I will make use of that that feature in a moment. So remember, what that means is essentially these two pieces are now a mirror image of each other. So they're still copies. Whatever I do to one side will happen to the other side, but if I change the inside face of one, the inside face of the other will change. Okay, so let's draw a bottom on this drawer. And of course I realise that if I'm going to fit a bottom piece on, then I need to make the sides a little bit shorter. So I'm moving the sides and the front and the back piece, moving them all, or stretching them all upwards to be 1/4 of an inch shorter, and that gives us room to put a 1/4 inch piece of plywood on as the base. So again, to draw that, use the rectangle tool, go from one diagonal corner to the other. And then pull that down for 1/4 inch plywood. Now I could stop at that point, but I'm thinking that that drawer is not particularly strong if it's made like that with the bottom just attached. So I'm now going to play around and do something a little bit more detailed with the drawer. But just for reference, looking at the timer, that was about 35 minutes to get to that completed diagram. So now what I'm doing is I'm pushing in all of the front face and the two side faces, pushing it in by 1/4 of an inch. Pushing each of them in by 1/4 of an inch, and then what that's going to allow me to do is to create a dado in the sides and the face to receive that bottom. So the bottom will be recessed into the sides and the face. Okay, so there you can see that the bottom is now sized correctly. And I'm going to move it up, so again moving it way too far just to make sure that I'm on that blue axis, and then typing in how far it should actually move, so 1/2 an inch. So what that gives me now is, with the base moved up 1/2 an inch, I've now got a 1/2 inch overhang for the face and the sides. Now by hiding the face, I can see where I need to cut the dado in the side pieces. So let's draw some guides. And we're coming in 1/4 of an inch. And coming up 1/4 of an inch. Now you see what happened there? I snapped to the corner, so it started drawing a line from the corner instead of the edge. So undo that, make sure I'm somewhere in the middle of the edge and drag that up, and I'm snapping to the corner, or the edge of the drawer bottom. And the same thing with the top line. Oh, went too far. Let's draw that again. And now we can see so that one's 1/2 an inch up from the bottom. So now I've got my guides. I'm going to hide the bottom piece of the drawer so that I can work on the side. Oh, I'm going to colour it first, it seems. Okay. Right click and hide. So now I'm looking at that drawer side, and what I'm going to do is just like cutting the notch out of the cabinet side panels, I'm going to draw something on the face. So highlight the face and then draw something on it to create a cutout in the face, and then just push that, and what I'm doing is pushing all the way to the back panel, so all the way back. And that's it, and you can see that groove was created on the left hand side piece, and because I'd flipped them when I copied, the groove is on the inside of both panels. If I hadn't flipped them, you would see that the groove is on the outside, and you then have to flip them, or flip one of them. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do here is just push the base of the back of the cabinet up. And so the idea here is that the bottom of the drawer can be slid in from the back and screwed to the back piece, and then removed and replaced if necessary. So I'm going to unhide the pieces that I hid. So just unhide all, and now we can see we're getting there with the drawer. Now a couple of things to note. First of all, I don't like the way that looks at the back there, so I'm going to actually push the back piece in from either side and extend the side pieces so that the side pieces run all the way to the back of the drawer. So I select the side, use the push-pull tool, and I'm snapping to that inside corner. And I'll spin around and do the same to the other side of the back piece. And push that in, and again make it flush with that inside corner. And now I think if I rotate it round, I can just about see the end of one of the side pieces there. Select that and pull that out by 1/2 inch. I know it's 1/2 inch, that'll bring it flush with the back of the drawer. And again, because those sides are copies of each other, when one's stretched, the other one's stretched. So that's looking good. However, the front piece is now a problem, and the front piece, of course, has been resized because of what I did to the back piece. So I need to make that unique. So now the front piece is not the same as the back, and pull that out to be flush with the side of the drawers and flush with the bottom. And the other side as well. Okay, that's starting to look good, but actually we're missing a groove. If I hide the side piece there, then there should be a groove in the front of the drawer. Now Now again, we've already got those guidelines, so I can reuse the guidelines. I'm drawing a square and I'm making sure that it's square, so it's going to be 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. And then I can push that and push it as far as it'll go, and you see there's a little thing that flashed up there, and that's telling me that it can't go any further than 10 inches, which is the width of the draw. So that's the groove all the way through. The base, the bottom of the drawer fits in the groove nicely, and so I can now get rid of those guidelines and redisplay unhide the side piece. There we go. So we now have a drawer that's maybe got slightly stronger construction, but it's now too short. So what I'll do is select every piece of the drawer, so the back, the sides, the base, the front, and move them all downwards. Again, making sure it's going straight down on that blue axis, and then telling it that actually I only wanted it to move 1/2 inch. So now that I've moved that 1/2 inch, I need to stretch the top parts of the drawer, so the top faces, so that it fills the gap. So I bring those up 0.5. Again, start pulling them in the right direction and then just type the number in. Same with the sides. And the front. Here again, I'm just going to stretch this up until it's flush with the sides, because I know the sides are already the right height. Okay, so that should be good. The drawer now fits at the top, and oh, it looks like it's the wrong size at the bottom. I look at the bottom. Yep, I pulled it down too much. I pulled it down 1/2 inch instead of 1/4 inch. So I've got to fix that. So first thing to do is to shrink them by 1/4 inch. Again, once one face is in the right position, I can then push and pull other faces to the same point. Okay, so now I'm finally confident that the drawer is the right size. I just need to move it up by 1/4 inch. So again, I select every component in the drawer. Move up, and you see there it's snapping to different lines. But again, if I make sure I'm moving on the blue axis, and then just type in the distance that I need to move. And there we go. That drawer now fits. And I can push it all the way back. If I use the corner, I can push the corner until it meets the corner of the frame. So there it is all the way back. And maybe you just want to pull it out a little bit just to show that it's a drawer. So pulling out on the red axis and type the distance. Okay, so there is a finished cabinet. Now if you do need to, if I refer to the original drawing, then it looks like those dimensions are different. If you need to change a dimension, so let's say we need to change the height, then it's usually a combination of things. Some pieces will just move up or down, and other pieces will need to be stretched. So in this instance I'm going to shorten the cabinet. So I'll start with the side. Now the side obviously needs to be shortened. It doesn't move, it's got to be a push-pull type of activity. Now the problem is if I just push that top piece, then what you'll find is that the notch doesn't move with it. So that's not what I want to do. What I need to do is to select all of the parts of that panel that need to move. So by extending from the left hand side and dragging the select box, it's actually selecting everything that's fully contained within the select box. So that allows me to select the top face and the notch side and the bottom of the notch all as one thing, and then move all of them, and I'll move them 6 inches. So that's the one side moved. The back doesn't have any notches, so I can just use the push-pull tool to just push that down, and again I'm referencing the side that I've just moved. The shelf and the front piece don't have to stretch, they can just move, but again I need to make sure they're moving in the right dimension. So there it's trying to move in the green dimension, but by playing around I can get it to move on the blue axis, the vertical axis, and again I'm telling it to move 6 inches. So there we go, that's snapped into place there. And I'll go around and do the same thing on this side panel. Remember, the panels are now unique because I had to make a change to one of them and not the other. So any modifications I have to make to both of them. Now there I didn't actually include all of the corners when I tried to select, so it didn't select that top face. Now I've got all of the faces selected that I need, and I can drag them down and type in the 6 inches again. So there I've just shrunk that cabinet. And I think that's as far as I'm going to go. So I hope that was useful.